Concepts, Values and Wise Advice from the Billy Meier Contacts, compiled by David Chance, revised October 18, 2023.
Leadership.
Ask Its Explanations Part 1.
The Earth human should protect himself from providing any help to such power-greedy sects and rulers, because they cause the smallest help to become a deadly weapon against the helper, in order, therewith, to come closer, step by step, to the fulfillment of their addiction to world domination. Sectarianism is just as much aligned only with greed for money and power, as certain holders of power are aligned with enslaving world domination. Sectarianism likewise serves, for its believers and followers, only as a means to an end, as is peculiar to every actual religion, every ideology, as well as every secret society which demands world domination, and every political ruler. Statesmen must be appointed who prepare certain things towards the prevention of the threatening catastrophe. But as is usual with the earth humans, many will inwardly and outwardly succumb to their greed for power, even if they will maybe not openly and understandably demonstrate it externally for their followers. As usual, they will have enemies and will be, in some cases, gotten rid of by them, who, not knowing that they thereby, and due to their own power greed and unreasonableness, will help to hinder the catastrophe. Thus their death-bringing intrigues and desires for power will be ultimately transformed toward good purposes. Note: for an explanation of the threatening catastrophe, see Ask Its Explanations, Part 196, 127-122 to 223. 97. The Earth human has become capable of destroying his world in an atomic explosion, which would bring very dangerous consequences for the entire system.
Contact Report 3.
Without exception, all governments on Earth are staffed by human beings who have the characteristic of addiction to might and profit.
Contact Report 31.
Nowhere is humanity to be found, also not in a peaceful demonstration. Everything is only lies and deceit, malicious deception and self-importance with the sense of wanting to make oneself better than the human beings of the earth really are. But this is only because he or she has not yet perceived himself or herself and consequently still lies to himself or herself. If he or she really wanted to practice self-knowledge and act in humanity, he or she would take hold of the spiritual teaching in order to finally find the truth and try to act accordingly. The consequence of this would be that the peoples would depose their governments and replace them with spiritual leaders. Through earth humans, then, who would know, rule, and honor the truth and the natural and creational laws, whereby they would govern the earth and all human beings unselfishly and in correct form.
Contact Report 45.
Many of your politicians and scientists are absolutely irresponsible creatures who must be deprived of their power in order to be replaced by rational and responsible forces. Unfortunately, this can only be achieved through logical non-violence, which should be exercised by the people themselves. The only remaining path for the human beings of the earth is through actions in logic and rationality. For far too long, humanity has been fooled by those responsible, so it can no longer achieve anything in appropriate, peaceful forms. The might on the earth is embodied by politics, religions, and scientists, and exactly this power must be broken, otherwise the earth human suffers a very bad end, not only by war and extermination, but also by the atomization, poisoning, or other destruction of the planet. But humankind on Earth still has some time to reflect and to snatch the grip of power from the powerful ones, as you call them, and to live according to the natural rules of life.
Contact Report 806.
What can one do against those stupid and idiotic people in power who are incapable of thinking things through for themselves? who do not think and who cannot see and recognize everything as it really is. They do not allow those who are logical and reasonable and whose sensible thoughts and values would solve many intractable problems. They are simply disregarded, pushed aside and even laughed at, because the great and the opinionated are too stupid and too dumb to understand what the thinking and the reasoning really achieve in their megalomania and self-importance. The big and the right wing, as well as those addicted to power, believe themselves to be superior to all those who really think, as well as to the people, and especially to those citizens who are capable of thinking further than just the tip of their nose. But it is impossible to make this clear to the megalomaniacs and autocrats in the governments, because they imagine that they are infallible and know everything better than those of the people who are really able to think and consider everything and draw the correct conclusions from it.
Contact Report 832.
It really makes one wonder how stupid and dumb those voters must be who elect or elevate such lowly intelligent creatures to their offices, and that they tolerate their wrongdoings and do not chase these elements from their posts. That really knocks the bottom out of the barrel.
Contact Report 838.
If demands are simply made before even a conversation is brought about, then all is lost from the start, for such self-importance proves that instead of logic, understanding, reason, and peacefulness, there is always only the opposite up for discussion. Also, no insight, but effectively only a will to command, a will to dictate, and an attitude of power.
Contact Report 844.
Besides, as head of the FIGU, as after my departure also the president of the FIGU Association, I have no voting rights. And that is good, because it means that nothing can be directed, that is to say, determined from above. But it is always the case that only the group decides something with a yes or no through a unified resolution. The leadership, that is to say, presidency, always only has to perceive the group decisions, and always has to be concerned to implement them in reality, that is to say, to make sure that they are followed. The leadership or presidency has to present its concerns as an agenda item to the actuarial office, which in turn has to present the concern to the group at the next meeting, and the group then has to decide on the yes or no vote. This should never be changed, because this rule actually prevents a person or an elite belonging to him from seizing the helm of power and acting as the ruling force, as is the case with state governments, leading to injustice, discord, hatred, revenge, retaliation, persecution, murder and manslaughter, and even war and destruction. What would be important is that the peoples would not be so lax and only make their fist in the sack, but remove unfit and autocratic rulers from their offices. To demonstrate and shout about in a stupid way and to believe in a stupid way and to delude oneself that the wrong governing rulers of both sexes will be impressed by this is more than just stupidity and cowardice. And unfit soul rulers do not only exist in various countries of the earth, but there are elements unfit to govern in every government of all states, also here in Switzerland. In many cases, they are nobodies and non-entities from the large part of the ignorant and uneducated people, who may have attended schools to learn the lowly education of reading and writing, etc., but who have no ability whatsoever to learn and work out for themselves how to run a state. Nevertheless, those misfits and government incompetents who are squatting in power, who, like all rulers, should undoubtedly be a role model for the people, are behaving completely against all rules of ethics and morality with their actions, posturing, and behavior. Nevertheless, these fallible rulers are left scot-free when they commit a crime and should be punished for it. This is irrespective of whether they have managed to get themselves to the helm of government or whether they have been put in power through elections, etc. So the holders of government power are women. So the government power holders, female and male, are spared and not punished, as opposed to all that, when an ordinary citizen does the same or even less than what the power seekers have done, they are made to pay or put in jail for it. This is an injustice beyond compare, So where is equal rights for all? Nowhere. The same kind of evil deeds that those in power do and are neither reprimanded nor punished, for which citizens are punished with severe penalties such as imprisonment or fines, etc. As a rule, the purpose of punishment is to make people think twice about what they have done wrong and to prevent them from doing it again, which is nothing other than retribution. That all human beings are equal before the law and that all are punished equally for the same law-breaking and misdeeds is only a pious lie and fantasy, because depending on the status of office, activity, and monetary wealth, the human being on earth is punished or protected for an unjust deed. This, in any case, if the person in question is not one of the common people, who is automatically burdened with the harshest punishments as soon as he does something that is not necessarily righteous, and this regardless of whether he knows or not that it corresponds to right or wrong. In particular, however, those human beings are neither reprimanded nor punished who hold higher offices or hold a position in government, or are even the rulers themselves.
Contact Report 849.
The majority of Earth humans of all states are so lowly intelligent and incapable that they often place completely incompetent persons at the head of their states, just as they thereby also entitle the perpetrators of war in any form to wage war, instead of putting such persons on trial and condemning them in such a manner that they are brought to a place where they can no longer exercise leadership power for the rest of their lives. It is
Seclusion from public life for life would properly be the just punishment.
It would be, yet that is not done.
Contact Report 852.
The majority of the world's rulers only have an overly big mouth and only utter stupid and primitive slogans that have neither hand nor foot, but only worthlessness, so that a valuable and lasting peace cannot really and finally be ensured and exist, but instead, strife and war continue to be waged with other peoples, and even with one's own national population, which often threatens to degenerate into civil war.
Contact Report 855.
Since time immemorial, it is only the rulers who stir up the people in a partisan way and make them hostile to another people, and then start a war. It is always the rulers who abuse their might and create enmity against other states and indoctrinate large sections of the population in bondage to them with hatred and enmity against other peoples, in order to then wage war on the other peoples who have been hatefully hated for a short or long time. However, it is always the rulers who unleash wars that are never justified, as they never were back in ancient times, and only brought hatred, death, murder, manslaughter, injustice, destruction, suffering, need and misery, genocide, and ultimately even disease and rampantly spreading disease. It is never the people of a country who start a war, but since time immemorial, it has always been the main rulers, female and male, kings, emperors, dictators, despots, sect chiefs and presidents, etc., as well as other elements of governments and sects, who indoctrinate the other elements of governments or believers of religious sects. As a result of indoctrination, these people, who are hostile and hateful towards other peoples or people of other faiths, that is to say religious sects, quickly agree with the ideas and violent ringleaders. Consequently, these human beings open the way to violence for themselves, and once they have opened it, it inevitably leads to war. This, of course, is advocated by all those who, without hesitation, are of the same mind as the ringleaders. It is true that these are only parts of the peoples, but as a rule it is the majority who howl along with the ringleaders, and then also act according to their sense, namely out of their indoctrinated enmity and with hatred. Consequently, murder, manslaughter, and destruction, etc. are committed without hesitation, while only a minority is of a different, and therefore peaceful and reasonable sense, and does not allow itself to be indoctrinated with enmity and hatred. And so the human being, in every country, that is to say state, should be anxious to appoint rulers only on sight, that is to say for a certain time by popular election, in order to recall them immediately and without pardon, as soon as any tendencies of indoctrination towards the co-rulers or the people arise, as well as hostility or hatred, etc.
Contact Report 856.
The power-hungry and all those who are stupid in government have their own well-being and personal wealth at the forefront of their interest, often through corruption or other crooked and criminal enrichment, whereby they top up their otherwise already highly overpaid salaries. And that such elements, of course, it must be noted that this does not refer to and mean the righteous and honest of those in power, but those who are in power are not the ones who are in power. And the fact that such elements, of course it must be noted that this does not refer to the righteous and honest of those in power, but only to the wrongdoers, allow themselves to act in a way that is contrary to decency, humanity, and the law, and are not held legally accountable for it, but for which any normal citizen would be punished, is part of the daily routine. All such unjust riffraff, and these unjust riffraff of the rulers of all countries may well be called so, and besides, effectively only the unjust are addressed by this, who must know themselves whether they belong to this sort, and therefore want to revolt against me and what I say and disclose, thus proving that they are effectively unjust riffraff, simply do not belong in a national government and should be neither elected nor tolerated by any people, but summarily deposed. All these riffraff care only about their rule, their might, and their wealth, but not about the welfare of the human beings of the earth. However, envy, enmity, quarrels, alcohol, religion and hatred, anti-Semitism, racial hatred, lust for power and domination are constantly blazing forth among the rulers, who tyrannize the people with new laws and regulations, etc. As a result, the people of the so-called civilized world are not able to eat. As a result, the human beings of the so-called civilized countries are no longer free, but are more and more browbeaten by laws, ordinances, regulations, paragraphs, decrees, and. Starting with the basic laws: citizenship laws, immigration laws, social laws, criminal laws, road traffic regulations, residence laws, asylum laws, federal law ordinances, legal ordinances, regulations, guidelines, trade laws, administrative laws, factual laws, parliamentary laws, objection laws, building laws, mediation laws, equality laws, freedom laws, bathing laws, religion laws, food laws, human dignity laws, contract laws and conduct laws, instruction and press laws, opinion laws, belief laws, housing laws, property laws, association laws, assembly laws, pavement laws, etc., and much more in 1,000 other forms. In every country, there are also thousands of regulations, directives and ordinances, etc., which make the lives of human beings completely unfree. And all these regulations specify how the elements laid down in a law and in ordinances, etc., must be implemented, that is to say, enforced in concrete terms.
Contact Report 860.
I know that, but truth remains truth, and that is also the case when the wrong people are in charge, even though as believers and pseudo-thinkers, they cannot even think as far as the end of their noses. I know that myself, that is why I say it. But all those don't say it who think they are educated and clever, but in reality they are just incredibly pathetic and stupid. They nevertheless hold high positions in governments and down to the lowest authorities. They squat in all kinds of offices and hold them in their stupidity and arrogance, and only hypocritical thinking and believing that they are great, wise, and absolutely irreplaceable.
Contact Report 861.
Then I want to talk about the fact that the rulers do not govern in order to righteously guide the people and all things as well as the country, which wants peace and harmony, well-being and righteousness, but the rulers are eager and power-obsessed to constantly devise and enforce new laws, ordinances, rules and regulations, and so on. In this manner, precisely with these machinations, the freedom of the citizens is increasingly restricted, and they are in practice more and more bogged down. Bailiwicking by bailiffs is indeed traditional, but it has remained so up to the present day. Only the name of the bailiffs has changed, namely into rulers, who also use a completely different system, whereby the forms and methods have been changed, namely with regard to the essence of leadership, in such a manner that the peoples no longer perceive the bailiwick system as such and accept the whole thing without grumbling. But this only happens because the people do not think about what the government as a whole really is, believing that everything is fine. The fact that the belief is fueled that everything is democratic by means of voting is even more misleading, because behind the backs of the people and over their heads, things are decided, put into effect, and, if possible, implemented, which they only learn about when they have already happened, and which they would reject. In addition, those in power, and often also errant members of the authorities, as well as the officials of the Catholic Church, are always protected when they do something illegal, unlawful, or privately wrong, or ethically and morally unacceptable and repugnant. But this is common practice, because as soon as such elements get into governments, authorities, or other high positions and can exercise power, they no longer know any boundaries. This has been proven since time immemorial, and it is also proven today, as will continue to be the case, because the peoples send elements into government or into the authorities or other offices. If they are allowed to vote at all and the election results are not falsified, which is becoming more and more common, who are not good for the leadership of the people, but only live for their own advantages, and often with corruption that is harmful to the peoples. But in no case should the righteous of the governments and the authorities as well as other offices etc. be lumped together, because there are very well such civil servants in all governmental, official, and other offices who know their duties and also perform them to the best of their ability. If now the young fallible ones of the government, and not only in Switzerland, but in all countries of the world, who have no idea whatsoever about toots and bubbles, are big-talking, mistaken, believing, and hypocritical, governmentally misthinking and mistreating, then it is not surprising that there is always war. Well, since time immemorial, there have been many madmen who held positions of power and believed they could conquer the world. However, they were never able to fulfill their illusions, regardless of whether they unleashed wars wantonly, in evil lust for power or out of necessity. For all of them failed miserably and inevitably with the wars they started and carried out, for things always turned out completely differently from what their cherished illusions led them to believe. They never brought everything under their control as they had imagined. Furthermore, it is to be said, as a rule, it is also to be mentioned privately with regard to ethics and morality that the rules of decency and righteousness are practically connected in all things, so also in governments and in politics. Thus, the personal conduct of rulers and politicians must also be correct, and all of them must not be guilty of any wrongdoing. And if a person who governs or politicizes adheres rigidly to this, then, of course, he does not belong to those dirty elements who consciencelessly play out their power and do everything at their whim only to satisfy their power. Their own lusts, cravings, delusions, ambitions, degenerations, needs, and sexual urges.
All this corresponds to what is equal to the truth. Consequently, I can confirm everything. Through my investigations and observations, because I am interested here on Earth, and especially in its various states of the West, and Europe with regard to the persons of the state leaders and authorities, I have learned many things and have therefore become knowledgeable about everything. Now, my findings are that the present systems of governance in the various states have indeed become better and more sensible in terms of laws, etc., than they were at the time when bailiffs still had the might to give orders. For the peoples, however, nothing has become better with regard to the bailiwick system and the form of the people's lack of freedom. This is because the countless laws and all the ordinances, rules and regulations, etc., that you mention have not improved anything in terms of the real freedom of human beings. Truthfully, through the laws and the often arbitrariness of the government, the authorities and their representatives and practitioners regarding the laws, etc., the citizens are no more than serfs or slaves of the powerful of the governments and authorities.
You can say that again, because in this manner the earthling has effectively lost his or her true freedom, and lives in 1,000 ways only according to the laws, ordinances, rules and regulations, etc., prescribed for him or her, whereby he can no longer make his own decisions, do what is logical, reasonable, and responsible. If, however, he or she does so privately, he or she will be punished according to the laws, etc., and deprived of his or her rights, as well as inevitably judged and treated as a criminal. Of course, the human beings of the earth need laws and rules in order to maintain order and freedom, etc., and to be able to live peacefully together and side by side, but they do not need any such that exceed the measure of what is reasonable. If, however, this is exceeded, as is the case in every state on earth today without exception, then the possibilities of righteous, peaceful, and self-thinking development of the human being are stifled and forbidden under penalty. He is even browbeaten to such an extent that in many countries he, as a free human being, is even compulsorily conscripted, especially men, to defend the fatherland as a browbeaten and involuntary military soldier, by having to kill enemies, that is to say fellow human beings with a weapon, etc., whereby he becomes a multiple murderer, whether he wants to or not.
Contact Report 863.
However, the leaders of many earthly states are too blinded to recognize the truth. Quetzal and I have clearly fathomed and recognized this in our exploration of the attitudes, abilities, and behavior of the leaders of all Earth states. This is what we have been mainly concerned with over the last few days, and we have also realized that only very few of the leaders are capable of effective and just governance. The majority of these persons in all states are only educated to such an extent, if one can speak of education at all, that they are capable of exercising their power over the populations without guiding them righteously.
It is indeed logic, reason, and sanity that are staggeringly minimal that such incompetent persons are appointed to state leaderships.
The earthlings are just believers of religions, sects and world believers, and thus not reality thinkers and truth thinkers. Consequently, it is also not possible for them to recognize who, how, and what the human being is whom they elect and idolize, put their trust in him, as they do with their imaginary God who can do nothing and nothing at all, neither in good nor in evil. And it is similar with the majority of those in power, who make the people unfree and enslave them with ever new laws, regulations, ordinances, and the use of power, etc., instead of making them truly free and peaceful, namely by instructing them in this respect, so that they then really preserve freedom and peace.
Contact Report 865.
According to our observations and findings of today, around 96.3% of the Earth's leaders are absolutely and therefore completely incapable of their office. But this has been the case since time immemorial, which is why only greed for power, hostility, greed for wealth, hatred, revenge and retaliation, as well as war and terror, etc., have steadily been in the foreground, which has remained so until today, and for the time being there is no hope whatsoever that this will change for the better.